Hello, this is Sophomore Astrology. My name is Sarah, and for this video, I'm going to talk about Chiron in astrology. Now, Chiron is your soul imprint of pain and suffering. When you're looking at your natal chart and you're trying to understand what Chiron is, everyone has a Chiron. And Chiron represents the specific pain and suffering you experience as a human being. Your pain and suffering is as specific and unique as your fingerprint. You can kind of say Chiron is your soul fingerprint or the signature of the pain and suffering you have felt. You know, honestly, since I've been kind of on my own spiritual journey, I've really kind of seen human beings in a very different way than I did before, especially the way society teaches us. Once you kind of understand that you have your own Chiron and everyone has their own Chiron as well, they have their own specific type of pain and suffering, then you start to realize that no one is better than you. And then you also realize yourself that you are no better than anyone else as well. All human beings are on the same playing field when it comes to this, because we are all born with a fundamental and profound wound to our soul. We would not be human beings without this. So it's kind of crazy to think that, especially in this modern day and age with social media, how we can have that illusion that people are perfect, that someone is perfect. And that is just not true at all. That is such an illusion to think that a human being is perfect because of how they are portrayed. We are all perfectly imperfect beings. And I just want to say too, as I go further, is that I'm creating this whole series of Chiron, and I'm going to talk about Chiron in each house and each sign. But I implore you to kind of not just keep it one-dimensional, and really try to understand Chiron in its totality. Because once you really understand that, then you start to understand that no human being is disconnected or too different or too weird, or it's just like you start to realize that if we all have a basic and profound wound, and this is in every single human being, it's hard to separate yourself from others. This really allows you to really open your third eye. So I really feel like studying Chiron in astrology is essential to unblocking the third eye chakra. So as I kind of get into deeper, everyone is born with this, but this is not a video to just talk about how broken you are. I think pretty much a lot of people might already know that about themselves, but this is more to encourage you that you were not just given pain and suffering. You were also given the spiritual tools to heal yourself. If you are willing and open, then you could really start to understand that when you really travel to those dark places, a lot of people call them the ego death or dark night of the soul, or people call it depression or the awakening. This is when you travel to that dark place and you are meant to experience and really face your demons. You know what I'm saying? Like when you travel to this place, you start to realize what is causing you pain, what is causing you suffering, what is blocking your blessings. What is the obstacle to your manifestations? Because you could be trying to manifest things all day and every day, but if you don't face the dark parts of yourself, you're not going to reach a level of enlightenment that unlocks the manifestations that you want. This also will let you know how you self-sabotage yourself. And studying the specific sign and house can sometimes let you know specifically what you're doing to yourself that is allowing you to just self-sabotage, right? So, I think what happens with this is that I think this is why it's important to study this when you look at your natal chart, because it's like, I feel like a lot of people, and probably if you're listening to this video or listening to this recording that I have, you probably are a very spiritual person, and you probably were spiritual before you even knew it. Because I feel like a lot of people who have a lot of spiritual gifts or have a strong inclination to spirituality, they travel to these dark places. They travel to, the unknown. And they travel to, like I said, all these places like ego death, depression, whatever you call it, They travel to this place and it's like they start to explore the depths of their soul. and they really start to kind of understand their own darkness, but they might not understand it, but they might be hyper aware of darkness, but they might not know what it is, where it's coming from, where they are. You know what I'm saying? Like spirituality, when you're inclined to spiritual gifts and you don't know it, you travel to places that you might not even be aware of. And in this modern day and age, there's very little external guidance or validation to understanding your own spiritual gifts. And everyone has the spiritual gifts, because if we all suffer, if we all have pain, we all have spiritual gifts. And that's just period. So, I honestly feel like a lot of the time you probably know people, you probably have felt this way too, where you felt lost in the depths, because this spiritually is like someone being stuck in a dark tunnel, but never seeing the light at the end of it. It's very torturous, and it sounds torturous because it is. It feels like you're being trapped in a dark place, and it's kind of hard for people to articulate what they're experiencing, because they're just in it, And I think what happens here is that you might recognize these people in your life, because these are people that on the job, these are the miserable people that no matter what you say, what they do, they want to just say or do something to sabotage others, something to drag other people down. You might have been this way too, where it's like that darkness and being in that depth and never kind of coming up from it. These are people who you feel energetically are trying to pull you down and drown you, because they don't want to drown alone. And they would hate to see someone swim to the surface, because they don't get to, and that's why I feel like also too, understanding Chiron, it lets you understand why people do the things that they do, because honestly, a lot of the negative things people say and do to you ties back to their Chiron. It goes back to their pain and suffering, and no one wants to be alone in that dark place, and people will do whatever they need to do to get there, or at least to get other people there so that they're not by themselves, if that makes sense. So yeah, that is definitely what Chiron can be, or what it can mean to people, and I think a lot of the time it's very sad, because either people become very bitter and hateful towards others. And especially, this is the place where people forsake God and get angry at the world. This is the place where people really try to find escape. And this is where you see people escape to things like alcohol and drugs and sex. And then unfortunately, you've heard stories of people who travel to this dark place, can't get out. And the only way that they feel like they could escape, because the pain and the suffering is so much, is through suicide. So this video is meant to really kind of focus on that pain and that suffering, but also understanding that you are not just born with this pain and suffering. You are also given spiritual tools to heal. And it is very powerful when you're able to untap this, because what you need to do is, once you're able to face your darkness, you need to face it head on, look at your demons in the eye, and really be truthful with yourself, and understand that there is darkness within you, as it is with everyone else. There's light and dark in everyone. I don't care what anyone says, where some people act like only some people have light and only some people have darkness. But I also want to say, darkness does not equate to evil. And that needs to be clear. Darkness just means something is hidden. And these spiritual gifts within you are hidden as well. And I honestly feel like you have to kind of approach it in a way where it's when people say when they're going to rehab, is that the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. You have to admit you have a problem. You have to admit that you're in pain. You have to admit that you're suffering, because you're a human being. It just comes with the territory, right? So once you kind of get comfortable in that darkness, and you really understand yourself, and you start to really see yourself in your totality, and kind of shed all that shame, guilt, or fear that maybe others have put on you, or that you have allowed to be put on yourself, and this is when, in this darkness, you really start to go through your Akashic records and really use the spiritual tools you have in your arsenal. And once you're able to kind of untap those tools, then you're like, okay, I have the tools that I need. I can find my flashlight finally. And then you could start to find your way out of the tunnel, and this allows you to empower yourself. This allows you to be yourself. And this really unlocks your full potential. This really gives someone a lot of power. And I'm not talking about the power to rule the world. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about that divine power that unlocks your third chakra, like I was talking about before. Because once you're able to kind of understand yourself spiritually and understand how much power you hold within yourself, it breaks the illusion that one human being can achieve things that you can't. It breaks the illusion that someone is better than you when they're not. And it breaks the illusion that you need something outside of yourself to connect to God, you know? And then also too, what I love about this is that, like, once you kind of understand that you and everyone else you know has a Chiron placement, it really makes it harder for you to separate and compartmentalize and categorize people and thinking that groups of people are separate from each other when we're not. That's what the illusion is thinking that, you know, someone is so different from you that there's no way for you to identify, when in actuality, the most basic thing that we've all been given on a soul level is universal to every single human being. It is very difficult to separate yourself from others. It is very difficult to say that this person doesn't understand you or this person doesn't know where you're coming from. It makes it that much more difficult. And that's what really unlocks the third eye. It's not as much of it's not as much as a selfish journey within yourself. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I feel like a lot of material out there makes the third eye make it seem like it is only an individual journey and it's all internalized, and that's not necessarily true. In fact, I kind of feel like the way it works is that, like, yes, you are on your individual journey to healing yourself, you know, kind of bringing yourself up from that darkness. But within that, you kind of, like, your perception changes. The perception of yourself changes, you know, because not only are you this person who might have been lost and didn't really know how to navigate yourself and really accept yourself in your totality. And then when you do, your perception changes and you start to realize that everyone has this pain and suffering. Everyone goes through this, you know, and that's what the illusion was, to think that you weren't in pain and suffering and that others are not in pain and suffering, when in fact that's all that it was. You're able to see other people in a light that maybe God also sees them as well. And then you start to understand that everyone is worthy of being saved. Everyone deserves to be that much closer to God, and everyone can get close to God without needing anything outside of themselves to do it. So with that, I just kind of want to say that that is like my explanation of Chiron and why it's so important to study it in astrology. Obviously, I hope you're getting at, like, I hope if you've watched any of my videos before, it's like astrology is not just some thing in the stars that is just telling you how to live your life. No, it's honestly a path to spirituality. And the more you understand yourself, the more you're able to be that much more spiritually enlightened. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this and you have a good rest of your day.